Today we're privileged to have Frank Lowenstein with us. Frank, who don't know, I know you don't put in your bio, but he's a Yale grad. He's got a law degree from Boston College. He was a foreign policy advisor for Senator Kerry and staff director on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and he's now a principal with the Podesta Group. And he'll do a little more lengthy introduction of Walter, but of course Walter's a Yale grad, Georgetown Law, an Army veteran, I might add. Distinguished journalist, I think everybody here knows that. He's been recognized with dozens of awards, not the least of which is a Pulitzer, and he talks and lectures and writes frequently on defense, foreign policy, and the intelligence community. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Frank.
Thank you very much.
We can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Steve. It's really an honor to be here today. I'll just say one brief note about ASP. I remember when Senator Kerry first started talking about his desire to have a truly nonpartisan national security think tank here in Washington. And I had a number of conversations with him about that and the sort of challenges we face in putting together an organization like this. And I have to say it's been an extraordinary success, and thanks in large measure to Jim Lewis and to you, Steve, and all the folks in the ASP team. So it's really just a fantastic effort, and I'm very proud to be here today. I'll not spend a lot of time introducing Walter, who truly needs no introduction. I will list a couple of his awards, which are obviously too numerous to go into great detail on, but he did win the Pulitzer Prize, part of the team at the Washington Post. He won the George Polk Award, won an Emmy for writing a CBS documentary on strategic nuclear weapons, and in 2010 he won the Arthur Ross Award from the American Academy for Diplomacy for his columns on foreign policy. What I can say from my time on the Hill and from working on national security issues is there was no more authoritative voice on these issues than Walter Pincus. And he was always, when we talked about getting reporters who were influential to help us make the case, Walter was always at the top of the list. And I think he did a lot of tremendously good work on the START Treaty and helping us to move that along, and really making the case more broadly for a sensible national security policy that is as far removed as it possibly can be from partisan politics, which is really the mission of ASP, why it's so critical he's here today, but also something that Senator Kerry cares greatly about. And those of us who have been involved in these issues know that there's nothing more important than depoliticizing them so we can have a sensible debate about what's in our national security interests. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Walter, and then we'll go to hearing your questions. Thank you.
I've got to put this thing down my throat. That's the way I talk. Well, I appreciate being here. Appreciate all you being here. I have a terrible habit of not going to these events when the reporters are talking. We're all derivatives. I just worry about that. I thought I'd just start off by saying the last 2 years of this kind of, I hate to think 40 some odd years of writing, have been different because the Post suddenly gave me a column twice a week. And it's different to some degree from what I did because what I was always trying to do when I was writing news stories is find issues that aren't being covered right and try to lay the facts out associated with those issues. Part of my past, which tracks somewhat with Frank's, is one of the big influences on my career, if not the biggest, was twice in the 1960s. I spent 18 months on a sabbatical each time, running investigations for Senator Fulbright and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. It's so long ago now, I'm sort of frightened about it. But I had written a magazine piece on foreign government lobbying in 1960. And in 1962, the chairman called me up and said the committee was interested in foreign government lobbying effects on the AID program. And what I had exposed the weaknesses in this magazine piece. Did I want to change the law? And I was all of 28 years old, and unattached, and so I was writing for 3 North Carolina papers and freelancing. So I went to the committee for 18 months to run an investigation for Senator Fulbright. I'll spend a couple of minutes because it's so different from today. If you ran an investigation for Senator Fulbright, it was you and a lawyer, just 2 people. That was the staff. And you had 6 months to investigate. And during those 6 months, you had to find out all the facts. You had to make a judgment of what was right and wrong. And your lawyer had to draw up amendments, in this case to the Foreign Agent Registration Act, and set a schedule for hearings to support what you found in those hearings in order to get the amendments passed. And you did that in the first 6 months. At the end of 6 months, you sat down with the senator and Senator Hickenlooper, who was the ranking Republican, and went over what you had. And then you laid out a hearing schedule, and you did hearings, one at a time, with 10 different lobbyists for each of the amendments that we had to the law. By the time we got to about the 4th, and the hearings were in closed session, and before every hearing, you had to give the committee a 2-page memo on what the hearing was to accomplish, and you gave the chairman a stack of questions. And the chairman asked all the questions. And then any member who wanted to ask would ask him, but it was fairly well done. And by the time we got to the 4th lobbyist, who was a good friend of 3 of the senators on the committee, and also very close to Everett Dirksen, the chairman called me up one day and said he wanted to take me over to see Dirksen. Dirksen wanted to talk about the upcoming hearing in which his friend, the lobbyist, was to testify. And we went in, and before we went in, the senator said to me, 1, you're not to say a word. 2, you're not to show any emotion. And 3, just sit and wait. And we went in, the chairman gave Dirksen our amendments. Dirksen gave the amendments to his legislative assistant, who walked out to review them. The senator and Dirksen then made idle talk. Dirksen's aide came back and said, they're fine with us. Dirksen turned to the senator and said, Bill, I guess we don't need to call X. And Senator Fulbright, without stopping for a minute, said, well, if we're up to me, I could see not doing that, but this fellow here is going to go back to journalism. And if we don't hold the hearings the way he wants, he's going to write about it. And we'll all get in trouble. So we're just going to have to go ahead and do it. And we did. It's not the only time we did it. I came back. I promised to come back 5 years later to do an investigation of military and foreign policy. In 69 and 70, which turned out to be investigation of the war. But the same thing happened with Kissinger. We got into a fight over who's going to testify and all the rest. He did the same thing on the phone with Kissinger. Everybody underestimated Bill Fulbright's sophistication and political sense. But that was a great lesson. And that's stuck with me. The other lesson was finding out that about 90% of people who work in government or more try and do the right thing. And that I learned within the first week how little journalists knew about what was going on inside government. And that's also stuck with me. So I consider that one of the great lessons. Then the other lucky thing for me is I went to work for the Post, and they, starting in 66 or 69, and then I came back in 75 again, have let me write what I want to write about. So I've been a very lucky person in journalism and tried, essentially, as I said, to write factual stories about issues that didn't seem to be covered well enough. And then 2 years ago, the column came along, And it gave me an opportunity not just to write facts I think that are being missed, but also put them in some kind of context. And that's been a lot of fun. It comes at a time, I also have been teaching a course at Stanford called Oversight of Government. Stanford has a very great Washington program in which they bring 24 students in for 14 weeks. Give them jobs during the day in government, on the Hill or in the administration or NGOs. And then they take 2 courses or 3 if they want. And so I've taught this course that I started up at Yale called Oversight of Government and the Media, but I always teach them the media is not doing very much oversight. We have become a kind of common carrier. It's my complaint about my own profession. And you get some insight, and they get insight. And I teach them, their 14 weeks gives them more knowledge of really what goes on than any reporter gets in 40 years. The only other point I'll make, which I make with them and which I thoroughly believe, is that we have turned into a PR society in which it's essentially government by PR. And that is, if you can sell it, you can do it. If you can't sell it, it won't get done. And as bad as that seems, we have also reached a point now where people in public life say anything, whether it's factual or not. And if you repeat it often enough, it becomes a fact. And I think the press doesn't understand that well enough. So that our job is really to try to break through what's become a PR society. And the printed press is really the only way you can do it. Whether it's magazines and print, television. I spent 12 years in television and believe it is an enormously powerful vehicle for news. It's a headline service, and that's what the internet does too. I remember when they introduced the internet at the paper, everybody was saying, oh, now you can put your notes on and write as long as you want and all the rest of it. The fact is that news websites, and the reason I know all of that, I'm also half owned by the corporation, so I have a contract to write for the paper. Work for the corporation about where we're going in the electronic era. So I've studied it, and news websites only are used between 10:30, have an audience, between 10:30 and 3:30. And they peak at noon. The average time on a news site is 4 minutes for Yahoo and Google and those people. It is 9 minutes for the Post, and it's 11 or 12 minutes for the Times. So essentially, you can have 2,000 word stories, 10,000 word stories, but the fact is that the people who look at it are looking at it for a short time, they're looking at it for headlines. And I'm so old-fashioned, Twitter and all that stuff is just nonsense.